have here is a LOR controller set to, it's unit 1, so 16 channels. And then I've got a DIY lighting animation, one of RJ's LE version 5 controllers here, DMX set to channel 1. So, and I have underneath here is a regular LOR dongle that is currently being used as an OpenDMX mode. So rather than sending LOR commands through here, I'm sending DMX commands through here. So, and the only thing you have to realize is that LOR and the rest of the DMX world send data on 2 different pairs in your Cat5 cable. So this little box here, if you're going to start mixing things, I'd recommend, I have 2 of these, and I'd probably make a few more. But it's just a surface mount RJ45 box. I've got just a short run of cable between the 2. And on one side I've got pins 1 and 2 connected, and on the other side I have pins 4 and 5 connected. And so it just swaps those pairs around. And so one side's the LOR side, one side's the Lynx side. And as long as you get the right one plugged in, so I plug the Lynx cable into the Lynx side. And this is coming out of my LOR box. You notice the Lynx one stopped. Once I plug it back in, it keeps going. So because these are set to the same channel, they're displaying the same 16 channels. So what this one does, this one does. Okay, so they're both DMX channels 1 through 16, essentially.
So the LOR's 4 and 5 pin, 4 and 5?
I believe
4 and 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you need, there's on my website, you know, on the Aussie website with the
and
wiki
DIY
and the
LA.
DIY, tons of that show you step by step how to build the adapter cable. All you're switching is pins 1 and 2 and 4 and 5.
Yeah, and there's different ways of doing this, but I found this way extremely convenient. And it's very easy to build.
Have you heard of anyone taking away some of the power wires that you had running both LOR and DMX in the same Ethernet string?
Well, there's no power coming through here.
Well,
He's referring, I think, to the
Yeah.
power of the actual signal. I don't see why that's not. There's no reason that's not possible.
That's not possible.
And if you want to have your LOR and your DMX run farther throughout your entire property,
Yeah.
you have a cable to bring to everywhere.
What I would recommend is if you're going to mix, to go ahead and run your LOR boxes understand DMX. And in fact, when they power on, they auto-detect which protocol you're using, whether you're using LOR protocol or you're using DMX protocol. And so they can run perfectly fine in DMX mode. All you have to do is use the right pair when you're sending your data to the box, and it'll respond to DMX commands.
Does the S2 software understand DMX in that way? The LOR controllers?
That's where xLights would come in. So, but I would recommend, if you're going to go down this route, I wouldn't, in my own display, I have some LOR controllers that I don't want to sell, and I've got a number of LE controllers and the DIY LA DC. Actually, I've got more DC controllers this year than I do AC controllers. But but what I do for the LOR is I just have a pair of these little gizmos goes here, and they swap the lines around, and so when I go into LOR, I swap it one way, and when I come back out, I have another one of these boxes to reverse it back to the way the rest of them are. That way, the whole display is running DMX. So that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to show this. Perfectly, very easy to get your whole display running DMX. So I brought one box of each. So, and I could just as easily use a Lynx dongle or an E1.31, and I could basically have them all run the, connect them together. The only difference would be with any of these others, it'd come out in the Lynx way first with using the pins 1 and 2, and so, and then you run, so you probably run your Lynx box first, and then come out and go to your LOR box. So, let's look at xLights for a minute. So, the whole reason I wrote xLights really, I made it very flexible, but really for me personally, it was so I didn't need an IDMX. I didn't want to. I had, like I said, I've got a mix of equipment, and I wasn't going to. I saw investment. Dan, don't listen to this. But I saw investing $250 in an IDMX as a waste of money.
So with S3 building support for these things and LOR providing a lower cost DMX dongle, with other people having DMX dongles, where do you see the future for xLights? Are you going to go into a different direction, or?
No. May eventually, probably will add more capabilities to it. I've had people this year say that, David, don't look at it, not you, David from LSP. I've had people post that, well, the LSP scheduler is giving them problems, so that they're trying to sequence in LSP, and then export an LOR sequence, and then use xLights as their scheduler. There will also be some, at the Academy, I was with RJ, and there will be some capabilities in xLights to use the Lynx conductor. So if you're decide to go that direction, there'll be some tie-ins there.
Well, there's another one, which is two major protocols, E131. If you're big on the pixels, E131 is one. So if you wanted to use any of these E131 devices, like SAN devices or any of the others, or Ethercon Gateway, or PixelNet. If you wanted to stay LOR and not have to go to Vixen and use PixelNet with RJ's pixels, xLights is the only way to do that. And I'm pretty sure LOR will never support PixelNet. I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah.
Considering its competing hardware platform. So if you wanted to stay with LOR on the software platform, that would be your only choice. So there's still a place, even if they release S3 with that functionality to use the regular dongle, there is a place for it.
And their LOR, or xLights, is the only application that would allow you to schedule LOR and Vixen sequences in the same show. Not that I see that as a big thing, but that is a unique capability. So if you were, copying sequences from was it Ultra Show that someone just posted? Yes. So if you were using sequences and ended up with a mix, xLights would be the only way to schedule that. xLights also has some testing features that people really like, so that's probably another capability is very useful. That, in fact, in doing my, when I got my PixelNet stuff and my smart strings, I debugged those with the testing capabilities of xLights because they drove them harder, and I drove out more bugs out of my setup that way. I ended up finding that the shimmer test in xLights was probably was harder than anything else.
I will say that also, from having run a several thousand channel display last year, testing ability, when you have several thousand channels and you're trying to figure out what's not working right, it's very useful to have without having to create a special sequence, because in LOR you usually create like a test sequence and you load that up. Well, this is nice to have a test tool built into your application already, so you could just, right within your scheduler, you know, you're at 6 o'clock in the evening, you're out there trying to figure out why it's not done. You can go ahead and get it, you know.
Right. So, so let's talk about how xLights works a little bit. First thing is its philosophy of where everything goes. So, in xLights, it's expecting all your sequences and all the media files that go with those sequences to be in a single directory. So you'd have, for this year, you might have a 2011 directory. For this particular thing, I've created an xdemo 16 because I was running 16 channels. So these are some 16 channel sequences that I have in here. So that's a little bit different than what philosophy of some of the Vixen or in terms of where things belong on your computer. xLights expects everything in one directory. So that's what you see on the main menu here is the location where all of your files are. Of course, then you can have several directories of different, you can have your 2010 show, your 2011 show, whatever, and then just change from one directory to the other and populate those with whichever files you want. So once you've selected your directory, then the next thing you would do is network setup. And so here I just have, here's my open DMX network with on COM11. It's already set, DMX runs at 250K baud, and I've just got 16 channels. If last year I ran with 3 DMX dongles, I had 3 DMX universes, so I had 3 entries here with this DMX Pro links. You just set the port and the last channel used on that network. So if you've got 32 or 64 channels, or if you're using the whole universe, 512, that's what it would be.
So those are all serial ports to access it. What about network connections?
So network connections would be E131, and then you enter the IP address, the universe number that that you've assigned on that device, and then the last channel's populated with 512.
So is the E131 also adopted by the Ether dongle?
Yes. So there's one subtlety that probably still need to work out, and it's very easy to change. There are 2 ways to send out the Ethernet information. One is a broadcast kind of method they call multicast. Essentially goes to all the devices in your Ethernet network. And the other one is unicast, or really means you're just sending it to one. You give it an IP address of the one of this device, and then all the packets just go to that one device. The Ether dongle is designed only to work in broadcast mode, and right now xLights is designed to work in what's called unicast mode, where you provide an IP address. So, but that's very easy to overcome. But once I have I'll probably add an option here, multicast or unicast. That's I believe that's the way LSP has an option, right?
It has an option, but it doesn't work correctly in anything other than unicast mode with the Ethercon gateways and stuff.
So
Supposedly it's supposed to, but it doesn't work properly.
Does it
I
work
had to run mine. It
with
did.
unicast?
No, I could only get it to work with unicast.
Okay.
I don't know if any of that's changed since last year, but it had problems with broadcast.
Yeah.
But it was kind of irrelevant. On my show PC, I had a wireless network to my regular network, and then I had a dedicated network card going just right out of there into the Ethercon gateway.
Yeah.
There was issues with certain hubs not repeating the data and stuff, so you're probably better off just directly.
And the Ether dongle is still new. You know, if people report problems, we may end up having a unicast option. Who knows? We could change the firmware on the Ether dongle. So,
I think they all said it was okay though, so.
yeah.
I didn't have any issue. I couldn't make it have any problem.
Maybe it's worthwhile to explain what the Ether dongle is compared to, let's say, the Ethercon gateway. Because the Ethercon gateway, all it does is it takes E131, just like the Ether dongle does, takes Ethernet in over this protocol called E131, and in the Ethercon gateway, each one of these are separate 512 channel universes. They're nothing more than 4 of these in one box. The input, instead of it being USB and serial, it's Ethernet. So the Ether dongle is outputting PixelNet.
Well, one set of firmware does
Oh, and then it gives you
PixelNet, another set of firmware it lets you do DMX, which essentially makes it the same as this box.
But it's only one output?
Well, the 4 pairs. You get it.
Ah, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you use a breakout cable.
Yes.
Okay. So, somewhat the same there.
Yes.
It's just not separate physical ports.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, there's other controllers that do have the E131 directly into them, pixel-based controllers. Jim St. John's controller is one. There's one other one. Jim St. John's has 2 controllers that are E131 in.
So, anyway, this does understand that. So, and I'm sure you have your.
Yeah, I was going to pay for the.
Maybe after Christmas I may borrow from you.
So the DMX Pro links is the standard links, and then the PixelNet dongle is just that same dongle with the PixelNet flash too?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, so we're sending out PixelNet now. So, yeah, as you can see, and really and it understands the difference between the LOR commands for ND-like commands. There's some subtle differences, so it handles all of that as well. So it handles a range of things. So it is important which order you define. If you have multiple networks, it's important which order, because xLights is doing its own mapping to your channels from your sequence, and if you're running a Vixen sequence, these are the first item listed. If this is 16 channels, those would be the first 16 channels in your Vixen sequence. And then if you've got, just for simplicity, if you had another network of 16 channels, those would be the next 16, 17 through 32 in your Vixen sequence. In an LOR sequence, these are mapped to your the network defined in your LOR sequence. So if you've ever used multiple networks in LOR, there's a regular network that's kind of the default, that's kind of It's not exactly hidden, but you never have to worry about it, because if you're just dealing with one network, that's all, it kind of defaults to that, and that's all you ever see. But now, the latest version of LOR supports up to 16 networks, and the first one's called regular, and the next one's called aux-A, aux-B, aux-C, all the way down to aux-P, or something like that, yeah. So, anyway, in an LOR sequence, this would be your regular network, and then the next one would be aux-A, and then the next one would be aux-B, aux-C. So, the LOR sequences and fixing sequences are mapped a little differently. So, any questions about that?
So if you had one LOR network but 9 controllers, you would just put your last channel as
You just put, yes.
9 times 16, that would be the last channel one.
Yes, yes. And the way it interprets LOR sequences, it assumes everything has 16, all controllers are 16 channel controllers.
Even with the CCRs, you have to configure.
Yeah, it doesn't, probably wouldn't work real well with the CC. Well, you can, and in fact, you could say circuit 1 through 50. You then just and xLights would handle that. You just wouldn't use the controllers after. You wouldn't, if that was controller 10, you wouldn't use controller 11, 12, and 13 because it's taking your controller number times 16 plus the number, whatever circuit number you've defined. So actually for my RGB pixels last year, I had, in my LOR sequences, I had a 16 channel controller that was channels 1 through 16, and then I had my RGB pixels, and that was controller 2, and I had 300 and something channels of those. And so then I just had circuit 1 through 300 and whatever it was. And that works okay as long as then you don't define something as controller 3, controller 4. As long as it's your last controller, it doesn't, you just have to kind of understand the way that mapping works. But yes, you can use circuit beyond 16 as long as you don't have the next controller. And
How would you do it if you had 2 CCRs?
I don't use CCR, so I don't know. Just I use different RGB pixels. So
Now couldn't he also just run the CCR and LOR and be done with it, and it'd be simple, right? Is that not correct?
Not sure.
In native, you're
Yeah.
talking about conversion to DMX, right?
Yeah,
Even in
I
LOR
have to do some testing. I don't think anyone's tested it with CCR, so I don't want to make any guarantees there. If someone wants to lend me one for a week, I can make sure
Gee,
it
who
works.
has CCRs?
Should have brought it.
So anyway, so that's the setup screen, and you can, if you need to edit these, if your ports move around, in particular if you change the number of channels, you can go and edit all that. Okay. So let's do the testing. So in the testers, it's going to list all your channels. Just this, I've only got 16 defined. That's what it's going to list. And then it gives you how many channels you want to select at a time. You do all, then you just have to click on the first channel and it selects all of. You're going to be testing all of your channels then. If you just want to test channels 2 and 4, then come over here. So you have, this is the dimming test. I'm dimming channels 2 and 4.
What is this one again? Is this DMX?
They're both running
Well-
DMX, but this is running LOR. This is
Noticing the
running LOR.
dimming. Yeah, the dimming.
That's the video I posted the other day. That's the difference
Exactly.
between the LOR controller. It shows you how good the Lynx controller is in terms of its, there's only 8 bits of data to work with,
Yep.
LOR and DMX. But what the controller chooses to do with them, can you set it at a low level again? At a very low level? Part of this is the function that's got incandescence. Incandescence fade much better than
Yeah,
LEDs.
but you can see that, yeah, they're not fading the same.
Oh, actually in here, you've got, they're actually fitting better here on your
Yeah.
LOR. Now that's native DMX or LOR?
This is, they're both running DMX.
Huh. Did you have new firmware on this? On the DM?
I have, whatever, 4.5 or whatever.
Huh.
It was whatever the latest was last year.
That's the Lynx one.
And this is a LE5. It doesn't have any dimming curves in it.
I found the opposite, but actually it looks the other way around.
Yep, that's why testing is so useful.
And so you can see how the filaments are just barely lit up as we're on.
Well, but now, see, I'm still on 16, and this is still on, and that's off.
There you go. So if you've got your dimming set real low and you're expecting it at least be on, you can see in the Lynx you're going to get a different experience. And of course, it differs totally with LEDs. I highly recommend, like Matt's saying,
And,
When you
and
sequence, you-
smart strings, again, are totally different. So,
hook up samples of your real stuff and check to see what 10% is, 10 to 100%. What is 10%? You could be sitting there sequencing 10% and it'll never show up in certain cases.
yeah,
So it's important to understand that.
yeah.
Some of that's going to get fixed with as more and more applications support dimming curves and the software.
It almost seems like the LOR is assuming you're using LEDs because the curves are so different.
That's right.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
There you go, you see on 4, we're still on over here. So, anyway, so then what I was showing earlier, this, you can run things in sequence. This is real good to make sure all your lights are on. Pretty good when you've got birthday cake lights here. Alternate's pretty useful because you can very quickly see whether all your lights are working. And this is very good on an RGB as well because it goes from purple to green, I think. This is purple. And twinkle. Of course, you can dim. Same with shimmer. And like I said, on the smart strings, I found this to be the most useful test. And my kids would come upstairs and, Dad, what are you doing? It's blinding me. I had 1,800 smart strings all lined there. It is very bright. It is very bright. Not something you want to stare at for a long time. Then this is test more for my purposes to make sure xLights is running correctly. It steps through a number of commands automatically, and twinkle dims, and twinkle fades, and shimmer fades, and all that. So whenever I've made a change to the program, I always run through this test, so I built it in. But you might find it useful too. Especially if you're concerned, DMX is, like we said, DMX is DMX, but if you're concerned about LOR commands or LOR versus D-Light, different commands are going out over the wire in that case. It's a good test for that. And then I just recently added RGB, in the latest version of xLights, I added RGB testing. And even though we've got just regular lights here, I think you'll be able to see the effect. So now every third light, I'm dimming. And so with 3 sliders here, I can set an RGB to any color. All right. So this one just runs through the red, the green, and the blue lights in sequence, whatever you have selected. And this one's it's a color kind of psychedelic color cycler. So you can see a variety of colors in your lights. And this would shimmer then a particular color.
So what test were you using for this March transfer? This show right here?
I was actually using, I was using the other shimmer because I haven't written this one yet.
Okay.
So that white, turning them all on and all off, you're really doing things to the power, going through those things, and it stresses them pretty hard. So anyway, so.
Which one is that, David? Is that the RGB?
I was just replicating that. I'm using the same thing, but it's just on these RGB devices behind me.
Oh yeah, you run
This
the
is just
color
on
cycle
the
test.
color cycle.
Yeah. So then, of course, the main thing then is the scheduler, and I totally changed the way the schedule works from last year here. So now you can have multiple shows per day. I know there are people that have things that they have a show that runs every 30 minutes or something like that, or you may have a different show that runs every 30 minutes. Now this can handle all of those. Or if you want to schedule music before your show, where you might have been using Zara radio, you can have you can set up a show that's just music in here, have that run, and then have your regular sequences play at 6:30 to 9 or something like that. So really, with this, there's no reason to use Zara radio, because all you do, create a playlist, you click plus, enter the name. I'm going to call this my music list. In this list, I'm just going to have audio files, and I'm going to play all my audio. And now with this, there's several ways to play. One is I can play an individual item. If I'm just testing, I can click on an item and say play item. I can move things around with the up and down arrows to change the order. But if I want to play the whole thing in order, I click the play button on the toolbar, select playlist music. If I want it to repeat, most cases you would, but there's those people that are running different kinds of schedules may not want their show to repeat. You have the option of playing the first item in the list once. So if you kind of have an announcement kind of thing at the beginning of your show, or a thank you for coming at the end of your show, then it supports that. And just one other option to turn lights off between each sequence. Normally, you can usually fix that in your sequence, but this is kind of a shortcut way of doing that. So, okay, so now I've got my music, and So now I've got my music playing from 4:36 every day. And then I want my sequences to play after that. So my sequences are in my demo. So now come on at 6 p.m. Run till 9:30. I want those to repeat. So now we have a thing where we play music and then we run our show.
What's the behavior if you have over conflicting schedules? Let's say something goes to 6:05 and our one starts at,
It's going to go to 6:05 and then start on the next one.
so the fact that you missed the start time extended into it will just mean
It'll start later. Yeah, and in fact, it won't interrupt either music or a sequence that's playing until it's completed. And so then it would, at that, if you were running two different you had shows with two different sets of sequences, it would wait till at 6 o'clock it would finish playing one sequence, and then once that's done, go into the next
but
sequence.
definitely won't play two at once.
It will not play two at once. No, only one at a time. Okay. So, and the other key thing is it won't run any of this unless the run schedule box is playing, and now it shows down at the bottom. The next show will start at 16:30. So.
Do you have an instant show feature similar to what the LOR schedule is? You just want to see a sequence right now.
Yes.
So you don't want to wait 2 minutes or whatever.
So I'm going to turn the schedule off, and because I want to show you what I've got here. So now in this schedule I've got a vixen sequence and 3 LOR sequences. And this button here, this play, will just play them in order. You can have them repeat if you want. We've got sequence playing on LOR and LE. So now I'm going to What's that? This was my first sequence. My first year, I only had 16 channels, so I grabbed it. I had one sequence and 16 channels. That was only 2007. Look how things have changed.
With the RGB, how many channels are you running now, do you think?
Last year I ran just over 1,000 channels, and this year I'll have, I'm adding another 1,800 channels, so 2,800.
Oh, I got it.
What are you sequencing?
LOR.
You got 2,800 channels?
I'm going to experiment with LSP, but which I've done on and off before. I do video, and so I have a little bit different set of requirements. And last time I tried LSP, when I imported my sequences, the video did not stay in sync with the sequence. And so that was a because it was too hard to go back in and tweak everything out. So if I had started with the video sequence and started purely in LSP, probably would have been fine. But the fact that I was importing and it didn't stay in sequence, that was a problem for me. So
I think that's pretty common.
Yeah.
The fidelity is never there. That's why I suggest earlier, if you're going to go to Light-o Pro, just read what you have behind starting with.
Yeah.
You got a new house? I mean, why not a new sequencing application?
But I will say I've written programs with 1,000 channels last year. I wrote some programs that I haven't made public to do some of the things that LSP might do, where automate some of the building of the sequence and So I did write some software to help me even just build the channel lists. Because I don't know if you've gone into LOR to create RGB channels. It's a PITA. I've thought about releasing my code just to create RGB channels because just that is difficult, it's challenging.
How much of what you have is available through a command line interface?
I've been asked that before, none of it right now.
Maybe you could put it on a monochrome monitor and it feels somewhat the same. Change your scheme to black and white.
Yeah, kind of the other thing with
Green, but not.
one of the other we didn't mention about xLights is that xLights is cross-platform, so it not only runs on Windows, but it runs on Mac and it runs on Linux.
The reason I asked about a command line is if I want to put a web interface for it. Let's say I have a phone that could control it.
So Harrison wants to use xLights for that purpose. xLights has scripting behind it. It can read files, so you could, from your web interface, do something like write my web users voted this the most popular song, play or sequence, play it next. And you could write the scripting capability in xLights would allow you to, if you wrote that to a file from your web, then xLights knew, your xLights script went to that location, could read the file and then play that sequence.
So I could replace the sequences by file in order to get the next one to play the one I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yes, that's how you go about doing that. So,
Also,
and in fact, my you'll notice this. This is part of my Halloween display. This particular sequence. My Halloween display is also done on xLights, and it's very interactive. And I have the script actually isn't that long. It's probably only 100 lines long. But I have motors that open gates. I have sensors that sense when people are coming up the walk. I have a sensor on my front door, so it knows when I open the door. It interacts with all those things and plays different sequences based on what's going on. So.
Can't find my helmet.
So, anyway, yeah, it can be used in that. Now, for my Halloween display, I have what's called an Arduino Board, which is a very low-cost microcontroller that has digital inputs and outputs, and you can program it, and it's got a USB, it's got an FTDI chip on it, just like any of these other things have. So it looks like you can connect it to your computer, and it's a virtual COM port, and you can communicate to that with the xLights script. So that's what I do for Halloween. So reads all the sensors and tries to scare the heck out of the kids.
Hooked up to the elf luncheon.
So anyway,
So right now, the adapter that you have coming out of your laptop is the same one that, if someone was using LOR right now and nothing else, you're using the same exact piece of hardware that they would be using as well?
And mine looks different. It's the USB 485B, and you have more of a cable type.
yeah, but they're all,
The cheap one.
yeah. So let's delete that. LOR, Uncom 11. And it LOR auto-senses baud rate, so it doesn't really.
What was the last thing you typed in? It's hard to see from
Last channel.
Last channel.
Last channel, 16.
16. Now it's being sent over here, but this doesn't understand LOR, so now I'm sending LOR commands over.
You say that both can be run at the same time,
And both can be run at the same time if you want.
using the same channel IDs.
Using the same, well, yeah, and that network's up there, you'd have one for LOR and one for DMX. And then you could send your first 16 channels would go to LOR and, however many channels you specify there.
But you couldn't overlap LOR and DMX to have the same
So
ID.
you couldn't send them the same commands to both, no. Because it's designed so that you're running a show and you're not duplicating.
So when you take your LOR channels, you have one LOR controller, you have 16, and you add 512 to that, and your last channel would be 528, or if you're only using 100 channels in Rgb DMX, you don't put 100, or
It depends on whether you're running a Vixen sequence or an LOR sequence. In a Vixen sequence, yes. In an LOR sequence, it maps to the networks that you define. So your first one in that list would be your regular network. Your next one would be AUX-A network in your LOR sequence. So for LOR sequence, it maps the network in your LOR sequence to the networks that you have defined in xLights. Okay.
Excellent.
Sorry.
Well, thanks, Matt, for showing us how xLights works. Just another tool. It's great that we have I know that it's a blessing and it's a curse because we have all these options available to us, which is great because it gives you a lot of flexibility to do a lot of different things. But you, of course, to use all those options and know which one's the best for you, and even within that tool, which way is the best to configure it at the software level and at the hardware level. You need to understand what's occurring. So it does require some additional understanding as to what's going on.
Absolutely.